Hello everyone, welcome to IIM Udaipur Research Day podcast series. My name is Divyansh Tripathi. I am a 4th year PhD student here in Operations Management area. Today we have with us Professor Becky Reuber. She is professor at Rotman School of Management and Deputy Editor and Reviewing Editor at Journal of International Business Studies. We are very delighted to have you here at IIM Udaipur. Professor Reuber, welcome to the IIM Udaipur Research Day. I wanted to start by asking what first drew you to the study of the international entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial growth?
Okay, well, I guess there's two answers to that. The first is that in Canada we have a very small domestic market, and so firms, if we want the economy to grow, firms have to internationalize and we have to bring foreign sales in. So that's one reason. The other is that soon after I finished my PhD program, a new exciting phenomenon emerged. I don't know if it was new, but it was exciting, and that is people discovered that very small and very young firms were internationalizing. Previous to that, it was thought that firms had to be older and larger in order to do it successfully. But more and more we were finding that firms were able to do it early on and when they were small.
So it's great that your research is based on the country that you have grown in and the phenomenon that were taking place. So early in your career you extensively focused on the quantitative methods, but later stage you moved toward the qualitative research. So what led to this transition?
So the training in those days, certainly my training, was all in quantitative methods rather than qualitative methods. And so that's what I started with. But then more and more I wanted to understand the processes and behavior behind the numbers, and qualitative research norms were emerging, and so I sort of went directly that way.
So how has this transition changed the kind of research questions that you are asking and trying to answer?
It's changed them quite a bit because I'm more interested in longitudinal research, so how things change over time, and I'm more interested in a socialized knowledge. So sometimes research projects can be very under-socialized and you lose sight of the people that are involved. But with qualitative methods, you're allowed to bring out more of the social aspects of the phenomenon.
So from your work in international entrepreneurship, what are the most important strategic behavior that help the young firm's success?
So I guess if I was going to say one thing, I would say don't go too fast. I mean, certainly there's theory that's showing that some firms go early on, but there's also a lot of failures when you do that. It's really important to have a stable business model, because if you start to expand geographically prematurely, it's called premature scaling, and things may not go well. I think we think of Netflix today as a global company, but it's interesting to note that it took it 12 years before it sold outside the US, and after 12 years they sold to Canada, which was a very similar TV market. And during those 12 years it found a robust business model, it got talent, technology, it got things that it needed that would help it expand afterwards.
So for these kind of firms, the early firms which are trying to globalize, I see that your research mainly focuses on the networks and the learning and experience. What should these young firms do to globalize?
Yeah, well, all of those things are important. I mean, when you go into a new market, they call it the liability of outsidership. It might be like when you go to a new school, you're the outsider and you have to learn the ropes and how to do things. And so, finding networks in the new location are important. Similarly, learning is important because depending on what you're selling, if you're selling a medical device, markets may be fairly similar. If you're selling furniture, they would probably be quite different. And so learning is important in terms of learning about the new market and what you should adapt. And experience is important because as a firm gets experience, the executives make better decisions, and the firm becomes well known, which makes things a little easier.
I see that your recent research has also started including the refugee and migrant entrepreneurship. So from your research, what insights can policymakers draw to help these refugee and migrant workers?
Well, it's important to recognize, I think, that the policies that work in one host country may not be the same as the policies that work in another. So that's important to keep in mind. Refugee entrepreneurs, they're suffering from a dislocation from their home. So ways around that are important to think about. And they're usually suffering from a very precarious economic situation because they probably had to leave money behind when they left, and so you're dealing with that. Different countries have different rules about whether refugees are allowed to work and the type of institutional support that they can get. So there's sort of no best path for policy. It has to fit the culture of the country and how they can best help them.
So, Professor Reuber, coming back to the entrepreneurial firms, we see in recent time there is growth of social media and digital platforms. So, what impact does these have on the growth trajectory of these firms?
Probably doesn't have a direct impact on all of them. It's certainly easier to enter foreign markets quickly if you have a robust technology because you can do it. But that doesn't mean that you're going to survive there. Again, it's a question of, can you replicate what you're doing in the first market, or do you have to adapt? It's surprising for some people to recognize that there's more than 100 social media companies that start every year, and that's just in North America. And so you don't know, the world doesn't know about those 100, so a lot fail. And so just because you can do something quickly doesn't mean that it's going to be done well.
So what advice would you give to the entrepreneurs in the emerging economies like India who aspire to scale internationally?
Well, there's lots of things to manage. Managing rapid growth, you can scale too fast, and rapid growth, we know, you've seen companies in India that have just grown really fast, and they just find that hard to sustain. There's some blind spots that come into that. So managing rapid growth, managing cultural and geographic differences, time zones, if you've got a small management team, can be difficult to manage. Learning how to select locations and how to sequence them. There may be a logical flow. So if you're an Indian firm, you may move to a market that is close culturally and geographically, and then make the sequencing go out from there. Finding a business model that works and understanding what can be replicated. I've done some studies of replications, and if you can replicate a business model, it tends to make things a bit easier, but not all business models can be replicated, and so figuring out what has to be adapted and how it has to be adapted.
Thank you. So now we have few rapid fire questions. What is the one skill that every PhD student should actively develop?
Curiosity, I would say, is a skill, and the habit of reading every day. So I'm surprised at the number of junior academics that don't read a lot. So, it's very easy. You can get 20 table of contents to your desktop or to your phone for that matter every month. And So I think it's important to do that in your own area, but also in adjacent areas. So you're up to date. You're not going to read all those articles, but you may go through and you may skim some so you know what the trends are. And then there will be some that you decide to go into in more depth. But having that, always be paying attention to every day, new table of contents will come in, and just keeping up with your field in that way I think is important.
So what is a paper or a book that has actively shaped your thinking as a scholar?
Well, this question, you told me about this question, and it did make me think, and I guess I'd have to say a book by Anthony Giddens on structuration theory. It was very influential when I was doing my PhD, and in fact all the PhD students, we had a reading group, and we would read, it's a big fat book, and we would read parts of it every day, but it's a really nice description of how you have structure and also agency, and so how structure and agency interplay.
And what is one emerging trend in entrepreneurship research that excites you most right now?
I think flexibility, and how firms are becoming flexible, and that's just not a pivot, because too many pivots can be dangerous, but changing direction based on different markets or based on the environment or whatever it is. You see this with, they're not really firms, but you see this with the influencers all the time, is they're just very flexible in finding what the audience wants or what the customers want, and being flexible to change to that. So I think that's pretty intriguing.
That's good. And to conclude, what is a single piece of advice that you would give to the early career researchers and entrepreneurs who are listening to this podcast?
So keep building your skills, and part of that is reading the literature and understanding it, and going to webinars and learning from sort of state-of-the-art people what methods are important. Like after you do your comprehensive exams, you think you know everything, but the world keeps changing after that, and it's important to keep up with that. I would also say find an area of research that both interests you, so intrinsically you're interested in the subject matter, you're interested in the outcomes, and you think that can make a social contribution. But I would also say it's nice if you like the practitioners that are in that area as well, because I've learned a lot from practicing entrepreneurs in the work that I've done. And if you can find an area where you can talk with practitioners and learn from them, then you get sort of a multidimensionality around what you're studying, and it's just not all from the books.
Thank you, Professor Reuber, for coming to the IIM Udaipur. We are very grateful for your presence. Thank you for this podcast. Thank you, audience, for listening to this podcast. Thank you, team.
And thank you very much for inviting me. I've had a great time, and I've learned a lot myself.
It's our pleasure that you are here. Thank you.